how cover crops influence corn nitrogen requirement. I think we all agree that the cover crops are becoming more popular. Main use of cover crops in corn cropping systems are often erosion control and nutrient retention and recycling. The recommendations for cover crop management in corn cropping system is to terminate cover crop 3 to 4 weeks before planting corn. There are opportunities to delay that cover crop termination, to offer opportunities such as improving soil health, reducing N losses because of nitrogen uptake of cover crops, and then increased weed suppression. If you're a dairy producer, you can also harvest that as forage. I borrowed this from Mike Castellano. What it tells you is that in that gray area, your soil organic matter mineralization exceeds the amount of nitrogen that the crop, for example, if you plant corn, it doesn't grow much fast early in the season, and that causes vulnerability to potential N losses. That's exactly the time that your cover crops take off and grow much faster. You can see here, this comes from a 45 site here at Cornell University where I did my postdoc, and you can see that the growth is like 0.6 tons per acre per week. And that basically uptake those nitrogen that could be lost. So my research tries to answer a couple of questions. How much biomass does wheat accumulate in the spring? Can we predict that biomass accumulation, carbon to nitrogen ratio? Does delaying the cover crop termination cause nitrogen mobilization during the corn growing season? And if not, what is the end contribution of the wheat to the corn crop? And how would those impact the optimum nitrogen rate of corn? So the cover crops, it was wheat. We planted them at basically late October in 2017. I wasn't even hired there, so I kind of owe it to Chris Wick that he planted them. So the targeted rate was 1.9 million plants per acre. The terminations were two. One was, we call that early termination, 420 in 2018, and the other one was late termination at corn planting. Basically, we planted corn into the cover crops and then we terminated them and rolled them with a cultipacker. The corn seeding rate was 30,000 pounds per acre. And then we harvested corn in early November. And during the cover crops, we basically, from the first termination date, that was 420, we measured biomass above ground, below ground, all the way to the basically last termination, which was 524, 2018. The root samples were only done early and late, and I don't have the root biomass during those three in the middle of the two termination dates. Each time we measured plant height, NDVI, which represents the biomass and the greenness of the plants, and the spat reading. Or samples, the biomass samples, we send them to lab for carbon and nitrogen analysis to get the carbon to nitrogen ratio. To see whether cover crops decompose fast enough and contribute to the corn growing season, we use litter bags. For example, the bottom one is the shoot and the top one is the roots. This is the retrieved bag from the field. We put the shoots on the ground and the roots in the ground, kind of simulating the no-till cropping system, because that's what we had. We had two cover crop systems, early termination 4 weeks before planting corn, and late termination at planting corn, and then we hypothesized that if we add citrus nitrogen, that could facilitate or increase the rate of decomposition of the cover crops. The way it works is that you have a known amount of mass of cover crop as times 0, so you know how much you had in the beginning, and every week and every 10 days you go and retrieve these bags, how much they lost compared to that initial mass. That would give you basically how much biomass will be remained, or how much nitrogen is remained in your system. And that one goes in the corn cropping system. And then we had, within the corn growing season, we had basically 4 cover crop systems: no cover crop, terminated early, terminated late, and harvested as forage. And we had 9 nitrogen rates. One which was from 0 to 250 pounds of N citrus. That was UAN that was injected. And then we targeted 150 pounds of N, which is typical of Southern Illinois, optimum nitrogen rate. And we split it, so we put all up front, 100 pounds up front, 50 pounds up front, and all citrus, to see whether the timing could make a difference. That's how they look like. You can see no residue in the fallow treatment, some residue when we terminated early, much more heavier residue when we terminated late, and that one that was removed, basically. What I'm going to present in those 3, and I'm not presenting results from the harvested one. So I should be cautious. This is 1 year and 1 site studies. It's very preliminary, but this is what we found. To answer question 1 and 2, this is what we learned. Though the x-axis is the days after planting wheat, and that the y-axis is the wheat biomass accumulation, and you can see the biomass accumulation linearly increased. Basically, each week we are accumulating 0.35 tons dry matter per acre. If you look at it this way, you can see it's like we have 2 linear slopes. And the faster one really fit what I just showed you from the Cornell data. It's 0.58 tons dry matter per acre. That's the time that's synchronized with that gray area that you could potentially lose some nitrogen. And the nitrogen uptake also doubled from April to late May, and it's linearly related as well. Every week we saw that we take up 5 pounds per acre of nitrogen. But also the carbon to nitrogen is going up as well linearly. Every week or with carbon to nitrogen ratio increased by 5 units. We try to predict wheat biomass with NDVI. In the first 3 days, that relationship was kind of linear. And when we included the data from the May 12th, that relationship became more of an exponential. It actually collapsed when we added 1 more data, that May 24th, and that because the wheat kind of headed, and that heading mess up with your NDVI reading, so you cannot really, so there's some limitation there. We also found out that when your wheat biomass is below 1.5 tons per acre, that carbon to nitrogen ratio is kind of linear. As we go beyond that point, it becomes more of an exponential. Much more forgiving there until that line, and less forgiving and much higher carbon to nitrogen beyond that. So what does that mean? What is it going to do to the nitrogen into the soil? So that's our cover crop decomposition. That's cover crop 4 weeks, that's our early termination. The figure below is the mass remaining, so it's percent of the mass remaining. And then the above one is the percent of nitrogen remaining. The red colors and blue colors are shoots. The green and gray colors are roots. And what you can see is that 50%, when the carbon to nitrogen ratio is lower for shoots, which was 27, the decomposition is much faster compared to the roots. that has much higher carbon to nitrogen ratio. In terms of the nitrogen, you can see that a lot of the nitrogen stays there. It basically assimilate nitrogen and tie up the nitrogen. So to me, it mostly comes from the roots, much less from the shoots, as long as it's very close to that 20, that common known 20 unit. When we looked at the planting green or late termination, it's much worse. Basically, the carbon to nitrogen ratio of shoot was 49, and the roots were 59. Those are pretty high. That definitely ties up your nitrogen and doesn't allow that nitrogen that you take off to be available to the corn crop. So how would that change the nitrogen need of the corn crop? So this is our 6 nitrogen rates that we side dressed versus the corn yield. This is fallow, so the green color represents fallow. And what we saw is that we used end price of $0.4 per pound of nitrogen and the corn price of $3.8 per bushel per acre. And that was our optimum nitrogen rate, 182 pounds per acre. And our yields are beyond 200 bushel per acre, which is pretty, we had a really amazing year, if you agree. So when we looked at MRTN, that's our basically calculator to tell us how much nitrogen we need, and it perfectly basically tell us that it's around 192, very close to what we got. When we had, so now the blue one is the early termination. So we have cover crop but terminated early. And you can see that the optimum nitrogen rate shifted a little bit. So we needed more nitrogen to kind of get the same kind of yield as of the fallow treatment. When we look at the MRTN, basically rate is a little bit beyond what they would assume, and I think it's because they did not envision of a scenario that the cover crop terminated a little bit late, 4 weeks before planting, and so if you feed the model with the data, that would also predict that. When we had the late termination cover crop, that's the red line, we don't know what the nitrogen rate is because it never plateaued. That what is very interesting here, if you look at the zero nitrogen, look at the yield differences between fallow versus early termination and late termination. It's almost like 40 bushel per acre. That represents the nitrogen limitation in your system, much more with having cover crop in the system than not. When we move towards the optimum nitrogen rate, we kind of eliminated that. So there is no difference between fallow versus having cover crop that is terminated early. And as we go forward, they're almost non-existent. That suggests that we need, for all cover crop management system, we need to have different protocols for nitrogen management. So this figure basically is at the end timing and how it impacts corn yield. We picked 150 pounds of N, and now we know that the 150 was limited. So our corn was limited with nitrogen with 150, and you can see there was no really differences between early putting all N up front versus side dressing it or splitting it. What is interesting is that in the fallow, or yield is higher than the cover crop terminated early and cover crop terminated late. That was fixed in the previous slides that I showed you, just because we put the right amount of N in the system. So what I found out preliminary is that we have the potential to predict or estimate wheat yield or cover crop yields in general and their carbon to nitrogen ratio. If you delay the wheat termination until planting, I think you're going to be punished with mobilization. I think we should find ways that reduce the end limitation, especially through roots, maybe skipping the corn planting, bumping up, or wheat is cheap. You can bump up your seeding rate. That would make it thinner, more leafier, less C-to-1 ratio that could be decomposed much faster. And then I think MRTN effectively and was excellent in predicting optimum nitrogen need when we had a fallow system. When we had cover crops, I think we need to feed the model more data so that it provides scenarios that could predict the yield. I really should thank Chris Wick, who is here. I wouldn't have this project without him. My technician, Randy Lang, Gurbir Singh, and I have to thank John and Carl for allowing me to have Gurbir to help me. We were talking about 144 plots that was beyond my capability to do it alone. And the funding of it comes from my startup package. I'm very new, so thank you. Thank you.